and welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and I'm a physical therapist, owner of FitAfterBreastCancer.com, and a Christian life coach. And I really like to talk to people who have overcome something that they had to rise up through. And each area of life, whether it be financial, emotional, relational, or health-wise, is a part of that journey. And so with some of the conversations that I have with people, they share something that is life-altering to the point that there is no turning back from this event, either for them, their family, or friends. And with the no turning back, that usually does imply a death. And my guest today is Eric Daddario, who shares the death of his brother, how he overcame this, and how he now looks to help others who are also going through addiction move forward and rise up to claim their lives. Thanks for being on In the Rising podcast. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me on your podcast. I'm excited.
So I really enjoy having conversations with people who have had some event and risen up from it. And sometimes that's a very permanent event in someone's life. This whole podcast started after I had a lot of conversations with people who were actively going through cancer. Right? There's a major change. And for you, you also had a major change in your life. And I'd like to kind of go into that event for you, how that changed really the course of your life.
Yeah, so I can go into the event. I'll briefly go over and then how it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
About 6 years ago, I'll never forget, on March 19th, 2016, we were sitting in my brother's hospital room, and I'll never forget that when the doctors came in, looked me dead in the eyes, my parents dead in their eyes, and said, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your son. You're going to have to say goodbye to your brother." Because about a week earlier, he had overdosed on fentanyl and he was on life support. And those were some crushing, devastating words. And later that evening, my family and I surrounded my brother's bedside, and the doctor came in and he pulled the tubes out of his mouth. He took the IVs out of his arms, the pads off his chest, and he slowly stopped breathing. And he was gone and never coming back. And I can remember vividly that moment of just thinking, I'm never going to get a chance to see him again. I'm never going to get a chance to talk to him. And it was just so devastating. It was a dark time in my life, and I really struggled with it for a while on many levels for many reasons. And eventually, when I started coming out of that dark time, one of the things I kept thinking was, how could he have avoided this? Like, what if he could have made a change? What could that change have been to steer him down a different path? And I just thought to myself, decisions. If he had made healthier decisions, if he had made better decisions in his life, if he hadn't taken that first drink of alcohol, if he hadn't smoked that first blunt, if he hadn't popped that first pill, maybe, well, I firmly believe, actually not maybe, I firmly believe he'd still be here today. So that's what really got me set out on this journey, to help youth, students, athletes make healthy life decisions when they're going through tough moments in life, or even if they're not going through tough moments, to make healthy decisions, to not go down those paths that my brother did, that so many do.
Yeah. And when you said, you were there with your parents and you heard you're going to have to say goodbye, like there's permanence in a physical, this world, goodbye to that. Mm-hmm. And you said there were decisions. Just to say goodbye and to agree to that was also a decision that is huge, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's funny you say that. That was the short version. When they said that, I didn't want to believe it. So I looked at my parents and I said, no. All right. I said, no, we need to wait a few more days. Like, give him a few more days. I firmly was just holding on to hope in any way I can, almost trying to buy time, because just thinking, hoping he was going to come out of this. And then, eventually he didn't. So it's funny you talk about that decision, because I was making the decision to try to do everything I could to hold on, and you could almost say buy some time, because I was just hoping he was going to wake up. But you're right, that permanent, decision to eventually say goodbye is permanent.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that too, there's a lot of grief, and there's I don't think you ever just totally get over it, but you've used that experience to create a change and help other people, especially youth, make better decisions, because we are all the decisions we make, and we are also the decisions other people make, right?
Yes.
And with all of that, you really emphasize the youth. How old was your brother at that time?
When he passed away, when he
Yes.
started making those unhealthy choices.
Unhealthy choices. When did he start that?
Middle school. So for my brother, it was really social anxiety, because he had a bald spot in his head, and he was just so concerned, so afraid, so nervous of what others would think about him, and not knowing how to deal with what he was going through in a healthy way. He started drinking, then smoking, then messing around with the pills. And the drinking and smoking started to just numb that bald spot he had, because it was just so much pain. He was so concerned about what others would think about him, what they would say, of how they would react. And so to get those feelings, those emotions, to just not feel that way anymore, he made those choices in the beginning. So he was in the 8th grade. That's when it all started for him.
Yeah. And you point out something that relates to that. We don't tend to just say, oh, I'm going to be on drugs one day. Like that does not come up.
Yeah.
And, oh, I feel like being an alcoholic. There is typically some sort of pain, something that we're using this to cope with. And for some people, a bald spot may not be a big deal, but when you are that person, it is a big deal. When how you perceive yourself interacting with others, what you perceive, your confidence is a big deal. Anxiety is a big deal. And you really emphasize that now with the youth. Can you go into a little more about that?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. The schools, the sports teams, when I go and speak to them, without fail, I will have a handful of kids say, something's really going on at home, or I'm really struggling with something, or my parents, my brother, my friend, something is going on in their life that is just really negatively affecting them. And it's not that they don't have the skills. They have the skills, but I firmly just believe that they don't know how to use those skills, right, to actually cope with what they're going through in a healthy way. Or maybe they're afraid to. I really talk about, instead of making those unhealthy choices, ask for help. I talk about who to ask for help from, what to say when asking for help, and how to ask for help, how to start that conversation. Because I firmly believe those are the 3 things: the who, the what, and the how. And if kids can get a grasp on that and learn how to do that, then when they're going through these tough moments, when they're struggling, instead of making those unhealthy choices to drink, to smoke, to mess around with the pills, or to even self-harm, right? This isn't just about drugs. Yeah, that's what my brother suffered from. But we're also talking about other things like self-harming, just negative ways of coping in life. When I talk about how to ask for help, that's what we're really talking about when they're going through that tough moment, to be able to deal with it in a healthy way. Because let's get serious, everybody in their life, more than once, I'm going to say a handful of times in everyone's life, they go through tough moments, whether it's physical, whether it's mentally, whatever it is. Everybody goes through tough moments, and we just need to have those tools, and we need to know we have resources around us to help us get through those things, instead of trying to deal with it on our own, putting our head down and try to just get through it because I want to be tough. I don't want to look weak. I don't want people to think that I can't do this on my own.
And what you said, it emphasizes isolation, right? Because when you are in that moment of feeling the anxiety and the pain, it's also isolating. Yeah. And then that step is, okay, to ask for help. That means opening up a door. And a lot of people may want to keep it close because, like what you said, looking tough. And when you're talking about who can be with you and help you, what are you seeing as a barrier for people to even, especially young people, to even open up, to admit that they feel something that is uncomfortable? What resistance do you get from the kids you speak with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm just going to double down on I don't want to look weak, right? So that's one of them is I don't want to look weak, especially with the males, right? I don't want to look weak. I'm supposed to be this man, even if they're, in middle school, high school, a boy, you could say, because they're not fully grown men yet, but they're just thinking to themselves, there's this stigma, there's this personification that I have to get through this on my own. I can't let anybody know what I'm going through. I'm a man. I can do this. And then, I see a lot with the females, with the girls, the women, is that they're embarrassed, right? Mm-hmm. And not to say the men are too, but the women, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they're upset, they're very concerned about what others will think about them, of what they'll say, of the judgments they'll have, of the image that people will have because they're going through this. And again, it's important people realize that this is also for the men too. But I really think that the men really just, they want to be able to I think that's really big with the men, is they want to be able to get through on their own. But they have these things too where they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they're upset, and they're really concerned about what others will think about them. And then another barrier too that we really need to break is, if I approach an adult, if I talk about what I'm going through, if I let that guard down and be vulnerable, I'm going to get in trouble. The adult is going to look down on me. The adult is going to get me in trouble in some way. I'm going to get expelled. I'm going to go to detention. Something's going to happen. They're going to call my parents. I'm going to get in trouble. My parents are, and then when I go home, I'm going to get yelled at. More's going to happen to me. But it's important these kids realize that the adults are on their team. Adults want to help them. Adults are here for them. And that it's funny because almost every single school, just about every single school I go to and I talk to, they say to me, just know that if they come to us and they say, I've been drinking, or I've been vaping, I've been messing around with pills, we're not going to get them in trouble. We just want to help them. We want to help them. But if we catch them in the act, it might be a different situation. It might be a different scenario, right? Without fail, every school I've gone to, they have said that to me. And I don't think these kids, I don't know if it's they don't believe it, or they're also, I think it's a mixture of, they may say, they're just saying that, I might get in trouble. But they're also, too, as I said, they're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they're upset, what their peers are going to think about them, their parents, the judgment, they don't want to get in trouble. So I don't think there's just one thing. There's many, many things out there that are really that are really keeping the youth, holding them back from having this important conversation. And I think that, parents, teachers, coaches, we have to do a better job. We do. We have got to do a better job of being able to be that, I like to say, trusted adult for that son, for the daughter, or if you're a coach, for the player on your team. And we have to let them know that I'm here for you. I want to help you if you're struggling. I'm on your team. I want to work with you, not against you. Because as I said at the beginning, I can't stress it enough. If we have kids who are able to open up about what they're going through, then the suicides will go down. The substance misuse will go down. There's the self-harm will go down. So many things you will see a decrease in if we can really paint that picture to these kids of, I am here to help you, not to get you in trouble, to hurt you, but just to help you with what you're going through. I want to help.
Yeah. And with that too, I want to help. I think what I've read about kids and as I'm learning more about them myself, I have a preteen, so trying to get a feel for what's going on with them, is that what people tell you they are experiencing, regardless of their age, is real to them. So
Yeah.
even if you don't feel it's a big deal, they're going to grow out of it. The kids at school, I was bullied too, and yes and no, right? We are globally bullied versus community bullied. Now, it's a very different world that everyone has to deal with things in, and you are globally examined and judged versus just community. And so it's a huge scale as well. And so as a coach, as a teacher, as any parent, to recognize whatever someone says they feel, that is true for them.
Yeah. And that's another thing I hear, right? Again, on the wide spectrum, on the wide variety of things of, well, Eric, I've approached my mother and I've told her that I'm just really feeling anxious, somewhat depressed. And my mom says, it's just a phase. You'll get over it. And I always say to parents when I talk to them, if your kid is saying that to you, they may get over it. It may, it just may right now, they may just be in the dumps because of something. They may not be depressed. It may not be anxiety. It may not. Or it may just pass over. And at some point but why wouldn't you help them with what they're going through? Because they're clearly going through something. And if you just say you'll be fine, you brush it off, then the next time they're struggling, they're going to think twice about going to you because you almost said what they were saying isn't true, right? You weren't validating their feelings. You were basically saying, no, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Like almost like what you're saying, it's not true. And that can be hard for someone to hear because having this conversation is truly hard. And just think about it. You gain all that courage. You gain all that strength to approach this adult that you feel like you can trust. And when you're finally ready to open up, they just basically shut you down and say, everything's fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll get over it.
It's a rejection on top of your feelings at that moment.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like, all right, I'm at square one now. And now it's almost, you could almost say it's a little worse because now it's like, I thought I could trust this adult. I thought they would help me. I thought they would validate my feelings. But now they just told me that, no, what I just told them, what I'm feeling isn't true. And now that gets them to think. And now they're thinking, I don't know if I can trust adults. I don't know if I can trust adults anymore with this.
And from some of the things I was reading, some people even doubt themselves, like, can I even trust my own feelings if no one's believing me? And it makes you feel more isolated and less likely to reach out. But say you do have an instance where someone reaches out to you, and says, Eric, I do feel this. I do feel that. What you said in that talk, that is how I feel. What is my step one as a youthful person? Like, what characteristics am I looking for in an adult to trust, and how do I do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd love to dive into here, just briefly go over those three things, right? The first thing is, so who, right? Who's the best person to approach? And I always say, who's that teacher, that adult, that coach that you feel comfortable with opening up? Who do you have that comfort with? Because there's not a specific person that you have to have this conversation with. It's honestly an adult you feel you can trust, that you have a relationship with, that on a level where you feel somewhat comfortable opening up with. Because, I mean, let's get serious. It's never going to be completely comfortable, right?
No.
There's always going to be some discomfort. There is. And so it makes it a little easier also when you have a friend with you. So I always let the kids know, if you can have a friend with you, you can let them know what you're going through and that you want to talk to somebody. Then it makes it easier. But I would say a trusted adult, and that can be your parents, your mother, your father. But I know from struggles I've went through, talking to students, talking to athletes, it's hard to talk to your parents. So a lot of times it's very hesitant because there comes with more shame, more embarrassment, almost like I let you guys down. And so on the side of your parents, a coach, a counselor, a teacher, an administrator, it can be your friend's parents. It can be an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, but it's just that person that you feel as though will listen, that you feel comfortable talking with about this.
What about stage 2?
Yeah. So now that we know who we're going to talk to, how do we approach them? What's the best way to approach somebody? And again, there's multiple ways you can do this. If you feel like you can approach them face to face, awesome. Approach them face to face. Let that guard down and just let them know what you're going through. Talk about your emotions, your feelings. Just be upfront. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying you got to let everything out right away. You have to throw it all out there. It may take some time for you to actually fully open up to this person. And that's okay. That's all right, over time. But when you do open up and you do really talk about those things you're going through, I always like to say that is when you start dealing and then healing from what you're going through. But let's say someone's listening right now and they're going, man, no way. I am not approaching this person face to face. That is too nerve-wracking. That's too stressful. Well, that's fine. You have the person's email, you can always send them an email. You have their phone number, you can text them, you can call them. You're friends with them on social media, you can DM, you can message them. And when we do these types of things, when we don't talk with them face to face, or essentially, I guess you could say in the phone too, and we DM them, we email them, we text them, what do you say? It doesn't have to be paragraphs and paragraphs of what you're going through. Just the simple, I'm really hurting right now. I'm really struggling. I need somebody to talk to. Would you be able to talk with me? I need your help. That's it. Just a sentence or two. And then when you meet up with the person, when you do talk with them, that's when you let the guard down. That's when you become vulnerable, right? That's when you just let them know what you're going through. And that's the third thing right there, right? So we know who, a trusted adult, how to approach them. And number 3, what do you say? You're just vulnerable with them. You're just honest. And you let the guard down. And you talk about what you're going through, how you're feeling, at your pace. That's the biggest thing. Not everything at once if you don't want to. If you want to talk about it all right there and just dump it out, awesome, go ahead. If not, you need to take time, great, take more time. You go at your pace. Don't be rushed.
And that's important for people to also know that no matter what age, because we learn it when we're young, but it's the same coping skills. And I mean, you're going to have major things happen throughout your life. It's almost a guarantee.
Yeah.
But the skills you learn help you later on in life. And hiding from them is never a skill that is sustainable. It's sometimes what you need to do to get from A to B to make through that day or through that month. But eventually learning to cope with a lot of things is so important too. And knowing that not everyone is your enemy. I think sometimes in the youth, it feels that way, that you don't know who to trust, whether they're your age or not. And how do you let that go? So you're going around now, Eric, you're talking to schools, you're involved in, I think, is it the Heron Project? Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah.
All right. And what do you feel that you have now gained by really just connecting with so many people and connecting and learning and bringing up other people, maybe that was not necessarily there or visible? I can't speak for your family, with your brother's event, but how do you feel now personally, like doing this for other people?
I have to make a living off this, right? When I go talk and stuff. So that I do charge, but I mean, no paycheck. There is no amount of zeros in my life that will ever compare to the joy that I guess you could say joy when somebody has the strength and the courage to approach me, or I hear they approach the teacher, a counselor, to talk about what they're going through. It brings me so much joy and happiness to hear that students, that athletes take this first step and they start talking about what they're going through in their life. Because that's just such a big thing. And it's so impactful for people to take that first step, because I know how hard it is. And so there's nothing else in my life I'd rather be doing than this. It makes me feel so good to be able to help those who are struggling to take that first step and start talking about what they're going through.
Yeah. So say, people are listening to this and they might be, they are the adults listening to this, and they will likely have youth where they feel there's a gut feeling something's going on,
Yeah.
an aspect. How can we reverse it? How do you, as an adult, make yourself available without blurting out, hey, something's not right? Can tell something's out. How can you, what can you say or do or act to maybe show yourself to a youthful person that you're
And
available?
that's a great question. That's a great question. I don't think you tiptoe around it. I think
Mhm.
you just you sit them down and you say, look, I want to make sure everything's okay, right? Whether it's a mother, whether it's a father, or whether it's a boyfriend of a mother's child, or vice versa. You just, or even if it's just a brother or a sister, you sit them down and say, look, I really care about you, and it's important you know that I'm here for you. If you're going through anything, I want to help you because I truly care about who you become, what happens to you, where you go in your life. And the key is, though, to listen. I always say we have one mouth and two ears for a reason, right? We don't try to just talk with them. And if they do open up and say something, we say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. You just listen, listen to them, validate their emotions, validate their feelings.
Yeah. And we all need to learn who is available for our feelings and who is not there to carry them at that moment. And when it's kids reaching out, then that's definitely where we need to be available for others. So say someone's listening, they'd like to learn more about you. How can they learn more about you, Eric?
Yeah. So I have a website. It is thedecisionswemake.com, and that has all my information on it. If you want to book me, there's a page to book me. My email, if you want to find out more, is eric@thedecisionswemake.com. Have any questions, or you want to set up a time and day to talk with me more about how I could impact your students or your athletes, or even a youth group like the YMCA or any youth group in your area, how I could come in and impact them and helping them make healthy decisions. And then you can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Eric Daddario. So those are all the ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Eric. I think you had a lot of valuable information, and thanks for sharing that pretty deep and heartfelt story. I think as a person listening, I hear the words, what you're saying, but I can definitely feel where you're coming from. And I think the youth that listen to you feel where you have been as well. And that is a gift to share for your family and in memory of your family's loss.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
This was a good conversation to have, but I'll be honest, it was a hard conversation. There's so much passion and energy behind Eric's voice and behind his mission because of the loss of his brother. And that is something he carries forever. And his mission is to make sure that others do not feel the same thing. And so really, my quest today and my question for you is to share this with someone that you think would benefit from it, whether they would be that responsible adult, or if you know someone that would be able to share this with someone who's going through anxiety and depression and needs someone to connect with, needs to know that there is a door on the other side of whatever they're going through. So I thank you so much for being here. I welcome you to look at the show notes and get all the information that you need. And I thank you so much for your time. Let's keep building one another up.